When did Israel camp at Gilgal, and why is this important? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Joshua 4 verses 10 to 24, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Joshua chapter 4, verse 10. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua 4, beginning at verse 10. So the priests who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished. The Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to all the people according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed over. Then it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over, that the ark of the Lord and the priests crossed over in the presence of the people. And the men of Reuben, the men of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh crossed over, armed before the children of Israel, as Moses had spoken to them. About 40,000 prepared for war crossed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him, as they had feared Moses all the days of his life. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Command the priests who bear the ark of the testimony to come up from the Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, Come up from the Jordan. And it came to pass, when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, When your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Over the last 2 lessons, we've been discussing Israel's miraculous crossing of the Jordan River. God had dried up the waters of the Jordan further upstream, allowing Israel to cross on dry land. We now come to verse 10 of chapter 4, and we see that this crossing is now over. We have 9.5 tribes fully crossed, along with the men of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Why didn't the rest of these tribes cross? Because they were to inherit land on the east side of the Jordan, as long as these tribes' men of war came with the rest of Israel to fight with them. And come they did, about 40,000 men of war. Now from these numbers it is obvious that not all of the men of war from these 2.5 tribes crossed over the Jordan, as the second census of Israel that took place in Numbers 26 would have numbered them at about 90,000 men of war. So why didn't all of them come? Because those left behind would need protection. For had all the men of war come, the Moabites, the Ammonites, as well as the Midianites or others could have easily come along and killed all the elder, women, and children of these tribes. So these tribes sent enough men, probably the amount was at the direction of God through Joshua, in order to help their brethren fight. Once everybody had crossed and the memorial stones placed in the Jordan were made, now was the time for the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant to cross over too. When they did and their feet had touched what would be dry land on the west side of the Jordan, God removed the barrier he had placed further upstream, and the water returned at the levels that it had before. It is said that the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of the people that day, and they feared or respected him all the days of his life, just as they did Moses. How did the Lord do this? Because the Lord brought to pass all that Joshua had said. Joshua said that Israel would cross the Jordan on dry land, and the Lord made it happen. 40 years earlier, Moses had said they would cross the Red Sea on dry land, and God made it happen. It was thus clear to Israel that God was with Joshua, and so Israel feared Joshua because of this. It is said that Israel came up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the east side of the border of Jericho, as our map shows. They did this on the 10th day of the first month. Why does this day have significance? Because it is on this day, according to Exodus 12 verse 3, that the Passover lamb would be selected. We're going to see that before Israel attacked Jericho, they would first observe the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, just as the law commanded them. But they would also do something else, something that had been neglected to be done during the wilderness wandering. What was that? We'll discuss that, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua 5, verses 1 to 7, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.